On a crisp autumn night, hundreds of people gather at a Michigan farm for a huge Halloween bash.
It's a chaotic kind of scene.
There were drugs being consumed, of course, a lot of alcohol.
Really fun, exciting, a little dangerous.
But it proves too dangerous for one young woman.
All of a sudden, she's gone without a trace.
We were all looking for her.
But even as the community comes together,
we ask that you bring our daughter and our friend, the relative, back to us.
And the missing girl's family pleads for her safe return.
We just want to know where she is. Just please think of it if it was your sister.
The mysterious disappearance sparks disturbing rumors about sinister forces at play that Halloween.
People were saying it was a satanic ritual.
And a tiny farming town fears that terror stalks its fields.
Any parent's worst nightmare, and this is not supposed to happen in small town farm country, USA.
Monday, October 27th, 2014. It's 4 days before Halloween, when Chelsea Bruck's mother calls the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and reports her daughter missing.
Chelsea had gone to a large Halloween party on October 25th, and she never returned home.
And the 22-year-old isn't answering her phone either.
It was unlike her not to return or not to call and use her cell phone to notify people where she was. She was fairly active on the social media, and her parents and other friends found it troubling.
Once Chelsea is reported missing, sheriff's deputies descend on the property where the party occurred.
It was an annual event. It's a farmstead which has quite a bit of acreage.
Deputies find the ground littered with red cups, beer bottles, bits and pieces of costumes, ghostly reminders of the huge pre-Halloween bash.
There were maybe 8 to 10 bands, maybe about 10 hours of musical entertainment.
It's an event that Chelsea, her friends, and her entire hometown had looked forward to all year.
The whole community gets, you have people come out in from out of town and everything.
We're talking about 800 plus people.
And the result had been a frenzied scene, lit by bonfires and scored by pounding drums and screeching guitars.
My band, Pickaxe Preacher, we're thrash metal. We play real aggressive, real fast, screaming type stuff. It gets the crowd going, a lot of energy in the crowd when you play that kind of music. Really fun, exciting, a little dangerous.
Most people there were drinking or intoxicated. There was drug use there.
You've got faces covered up by costumes. You've got darkness.
But had that darkness and chaos somehow swallowed up an innocent young woman, causing her to vanish without a trace? Born in 1992, Chelsea grew up in Monroe County in the tiny rural community of Maybe, Michigan.
She actually grew up on a family farm that had been the family for quite some time. Her mother worked at a local bank, and her father was a farmer and also worked at the Monroe Library System.
This is a family that, her mother told me they would eat dinner together all the time. They would talk to each other multiple times throughout the day.
And that idyllic small-town childhood had a definite impact on Chelsea's personality.
Chelsea was awesome. She was always happy. She was like one of the nicest person in the world. She was very family-oriented. She was always about her family.
After graduating from high school, Chelsea stayed in Maybe.
She still lived at home with her mother and her father.
While living at home, Chelsea saved up for college, working as a hostess at a restaurant outside the mall in the nearby town of Monroe.
Chelsea's a small-town, normal, average American girl.
She's never been in trouble before. She didn't use drugs. She did like to attend parties with her friends and have fun, though.
And the biggest party in Monroe County, Michigan, was Mike Williams' annual Halloween bash.
Cornfields and farmers surround me, so I can make a lot of noise. Everybody comes and joins in. Everyone always had a good time. People were always anticipating it.
We all go there pretty much every year. Everybody has a great time.
There were food trucks and a bonfire, but the main attraction was the music.
It's always usually heavy metal. They have different shows. They have all different bands play, and he has fire dancers. He's always has something big going on. He always threw the best Halloween parties.
And since 2014 was going to be his 10th annual bash, Mike was determined to outdo himself.
I actually took a week off work prior just to get ready, just getting the tents delivered and getting the porta johns delivered. It's just a lot of work.
Mike wasn't the only one working hard in the days before the bash, though. Chelsea had also put in long hours preparing for the party.
She had worked on her costume, which was a poison ivy costume, one of the villains from Batman, for approximately 6 weeks. Painstakingly sitting in front of the TV every night, according to her mother, sewing each leave on.
And finally, on the night of October 25th, everything was perfect. And yet, for all her hours of preparation, excitement, and anticipation, Chelsea almost misses the Halloween party she's been waiting for all year.
Her ride got stuck at work.
She had to find a ride there, and she had a little difficulty doing that.
She spends several anxious minutes on her phone.
She texted and called a couple friends at the party, and eventually one of those friends left the party that she was already at and came and picked up Chelsea to bring her to the party.
And by the time she does finally arrive, the party is packed.
The turnout this year had gone viral, apparently.
There was an invitation sent out to Facebook, and it just kind of blew up.
They had as many as 800 people at this party where they expected maybe half that many people. And as a result of that, there were a lot of people who didn't know each other.
And even friends have trouble finding one another in the crowd.
Everybody pretty much showed up in costume, which was awesome.
The crowd is so enormous that the organizers struggle to keep things under control.
And I don't think that Mike Williams was expecting this large of a party.
I did have security. We had walkie-talkies. We were in constant communication with each other.
But as the hours pass, the music's relentless beat, the alcohol, and the anonymity of the masks and costumes combine to create an atmosphere, at least among some in the crowd, that anything goes.
It was somewhat out of control, crazy, it was loud, it's dark, people intoxicated under the influence of drugs and alcohol.
And in the middle of that chaotic crowd is Chelsea.
I did see Chelsea that night. We hung out for a little while.
Despite her late arrival, Chelsea appears to be having a great time. And the poison ivy costume she'd worked so hard on proves to be a huge hit.
She was so excited to wear the costume that she had. She worked so hard on that costume.
Over the next several hours, Chelsea dances through the crowd, drinking regularly from a bottle of wine she's labeled poison to go with her costume.
She was drinking like what anyone does at a party.
And when the music finally ends, the amped up and intoxicated crowd is hungry for more.
After the bands were finished playing, a bonfire was lit, and the entire group of individuals, including Chelsea, started making their way towards the bonfire.
But as Chelsea is skirting past one of the tents in the field, she's stopped short by a sudden blow to the face.
She ran into a tent support. I don't think she saw it. She hit her nose rather hard.
The impact leaves her momentarily stunned.
She was bleeding a little bit.
However, buoyed by alcohol and the party atmosphere, Chelsea quickly shakes it off and joins the frenzied crowd gathering around the bonfire.
It was nothing bad, nothing to worry about.
But as it turns out, Chelsea's worries are just beginning. Earlier that night, when she arrived at the party, Chelsea had given her phone to a friend for safekeeping.
The costume that she had apparently didn't have any pockets on it.
And at around 2:30 in the morning, as the bonfire's flames begin to sputter and the party breaks up, Chelsea can't find the friend with her phone or the friend who gave her a ride earlier.
There was some miscommunication, and ultimately all of the friends that were at the party left, thinking that Chelsea was with somebody else. And so by about 3 o'clock in the morning, Chelsea found herself alone.
She began asking people for their telephone so she could call for a ride. She was unable to get a ride from anybody.
And when she reaches the gravel road that leads back to the farm, she decides to try and hitch a ride from the handful of stragglers leaving the party.
She began to walk down the roadway.
She doesn't get far before the glare of headlights approach, and Chelsea turns and waves. But will it be the rescue she hopes for? Or is Chelsea's bad night about to take a terrifying turn? Coming up, could Chelsea have been kidnapped?
Someone mentioned sex trafficking.
Or are darker forces at work?
People were saying it was a satanic ritual.
On Monday morning, October 27th, 2014, Chelsea Bruck's mother called the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and reported her daughter missing.
This was a average 20-something-year-old girl going to a Halloween party, and all of a sudden she's gone without a trace.
She had actually planned to spend the night at a friend's house, so when she didn't come home on Sunday, it wasn't particularly concerning. By late afternoon or early evening, Mrs. Bruck noticed that she still wasn't home, and she did become a little concerned.
It wasn't like Chelsea to not let anyone know where she was going. We all were kind of wondering what was going on.
Sheriff's deputies immediately searched the farm where the Halloween party had been held.
It was kind of our ground zero there. We did a intense search of that, just looking for any evidence of Chelsea, where she may have gone. We did not find anything, no evidence.
The investigators also spoke with the party organizer who lived on the property.
I don't think anything I gave them was really of much help besides just the information about the party itself.
And the more the investigators learned about the massive Halloween party, the more they realized what a daunting task they faced.
This was a difficult investigation right from the get-go. Number one, like I said, we had anywhere from 600 to over 1,000 people there. A lot of people had costumes on.
The investigators tried their best, though. They spent most of Tuesday talking to people who'd responded to the original party invite or posted about it on social media.
We just started to try to speak to other people that were at the party and get an idea of if they saw Chelsea, if they had any idea where she may have gone.
Unfortunately, few partygoers saw anything suspicious.
There's like 800 people there. I mean, how are you gonna know what happened?
Your best friend could have been standing next to you and you didn't know it because they could have had a mask on.
The investigators did hear plenty of rumors, though.
Someone mentioned sex trafficking. We are right in the middle of Toledo and Detroit, so it's really, really big in our area. So that was very possible that maybe someone just picked her up.
And then there were the rumors that took an even darker turn.
People were saying, it was a satanic ritual that we burned her alive.
Was it possible Chelsea had been some sort of human sacrifice? The investigators did follow up on the rumors.
And they actually searched my bonfire. I mean, it was pretty intense.
But there was no evidence of human remains in the ashes, and no sign of Chelsea in the woods and fields surrounding the farm, despite an exhaustive effort organized by her family.
Any parent's worst nightmare, and this is not supposed to happen in small town farm country USA.
They mobilized more than 1,000 residents of the community to go out and search field by field.
We were all concerned, and as soon as we figured out that she was missing, we were all looking for her.
And in addition to helping with the search, the community organized a candlelight vigil to pray for Chelsea's safe return.
We ask that you bring our daughter and our friend, a relative, back to us.
But would their prayers be answered? On the 29th, 2 days before Halloween, the investigators finally got what they hoped was a promising lead.
There was a composite sketch that was made of someone who they believed was the last person that anyone had seen with Chelsea Bruck.
That was provided by a vendor for band merchandise, and he actually had saw the male in the sketch leaving the party with Chelsea.
The sketch was immediately released to the media.
We published it, and law enforcement had hundreds of tips coming in trying to figure out who this mystery person was.
Chelsea's mother also put up thousands of flyers.
She would go everywhere and just drop stacks and try and get you to pass them out to people that were walking, put them in your windows.
You couldn't go into a business in Monroe County without seeing Chelsea's face.
Halloween came and went. And then Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's.
They were still actively investigating, but not that many details came out during this stretch of time. Her family, meanwhile, they were still holding out hope.
We just want to know where she is. Just please think of it if it was your sister.
And then, after months of uncertainty, it looked as if the family's persistence and the massive blitz of publicity might finally pay off. It was late March 2015, 5 months after Chelsea's disappearance, and 2 men were scrounging scrap metal at an abandoned industrial site a few miles from where the Halloween party had been held.
It's got several buildings on the property. They were kind of moving things around inside this building.
But in their hunt for things to recycle, the scavengers came across something surprising.
The guys found a green leafy costume and a wig.
Puzzled, the 2 men left the wig and leotard where they found it.
They did not realize the significance of the costume.
But about a week later, on April 5th, one of the scavengers came across one of the flyers featuring Chelsea in her poison ivy costume.
He noticed a resemblance with the costume that he had located in the building, and that's why he contacted the police and alerted them to what he had discovered.
We obviously collected his evidence and we sent it to the Michigan State Police Crime Laboratory. They are the ones that process evidence for us in cases. And they were able to tell us upon swabbing the costume for DNA that Chelsea Bruck's DNA was on there.
But the crime lab found more than just confirmation that the costume was Chelsea's.
There was a DNA of an unknown male.
And the condition of Chelsea's leotard provided a chilling clue to just how the mystery DNA had gotten there.
Both straps of the leotard and the crotch of the leotard were completely severed.
That kind of put thoughts in everyone's head.
The condition of the leotard certainly suggested a sexual assault.
But who was the sexual predator who'd assaulted Chelsea? Hoping for a clue to his identity, the investigators took the mystery DNA sample and entered it into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system.
CODIS is a nationwide databank containing DNA information from anyone who's ever been convicted of a major crime in the United States and people whose DNA becomes part of the system for whatever reason.
After almost 6 anxious months, would the authorities finally have a name to go with the mystery man in the composite sketch?
The person's DNA that was recovered from Chelsea's costume was not in the CODIS system. We have a DNA sample, but we do not have a name to go with it.
It was a crushing disappointment for the investigators, and it wouldn't be the last. It's April 24th, 2015, 3 weeks after the discovery of Chelsea's Halloween costume, and a man is working with heavy machinery in the woods a few miles from the abandoned industrial site where the leotard had been found.
He planned to build a residence there. He was in the process of putting fill dirt in.
But when the truck arrives with the dirt, the construction hits a snag.
He had a truck driver, I believe, that was stuck.
The owner of the property went back around and behind the truck to try and assess the situation.
But what he's about to find is far more than he expects. A horrifying discovery that will leave a family devastated and a community gripped by fear. Coming up, will a chance discovery change the entire investigation?
And the detective said, "You guys, drop what you're doing right now."
Or will it raise new questions about her disappearance?
He claims that Chelsea asked him to choke her.
On April 24th, 2015, almost 6 months after Chelsea Bruck disappeared after a Halloween party on a rural Michigan farm, a man doing construction work found human remains on a nearby property.
It fit the same size, description as Chelsea. We couldn't tell for sure, obviously, because it was decomposed, but we didn't have any other missing females with blonde hair in the area at that time.
It wasn't until a couple days later that the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office officially identified the body as Chelsea through dental records.
Not only did the medical examiner determine once and for all that the 22-year-old was dead, the autopsy also revealed Chelsea's last horrific moments alive.
Her jawbone right here was cracked in two. It was split right in two.
It appeared clear to us that Chelsea had been beaten to death in the process of being sexually assaulted.
But while friends and family were devastated by the news of Chelsea's death, the whole community was frightened by the chilling details of her murder.
Knowing that something like that could happen in such a small town, the whole community was concerned.
Even more troubling, the investigators still had no leads on the killer.
There was no DNA or other trace evidence discovered on the body itself.
And in the weeks and months that followed, the case went cold. By July 21st, 2016, it had been more than a year and a half since Chelsea's murder.
Everybody's thinking, are we ever going to get any answers?
No one knew who possibly could have done this.
But would an unexpected breakthrough change everything?
In July of 2016, I'm sitting in the detective bureau, and we were discussing some other things, the detectives and I, about another case.
And then another detective rushed into the room.
She kind of cut us off and said, "You guys, drop what you're doing right now. We just got a DNA hit on the Bruck case."
The DNA matched a man who'd recently been arrested on an unrelated charge, 27-year-old Daniel Clay. Born in 1988, Daniel Clay had grown up in Monroe County, but his upbringing was nothing like Chelsea's idyllic childhood.
Daniel kind of got the short end of the stick at birth. His mom was in prison when he was born.
Daniel's mother put him up for adoption, but that wasn't the end of his tumultuous childhood.
His adopted parents that took him in, they ended up divorcing.
Daniel was only 5 when his parents split.
He lived with his adopted dad, and it was just the two of them until his dad passed away.
Daniel was 17 when his adoptive father died.
At that point, he was placed for whatever reason in the Monroe County Youth Center, which is a home for lack of a better word, wayward boys and girls.
He has been in trouble several times. He did do drugs, probably since he was a teenager.
Once he turned 18, Daniel was out of the youth center, but his prospects were grim.
Worked at a gas station, he worked at a restaurant, he did odd jobs, and I don't think he was employed at any one place for more than a year.
He never had a stable place to live either. In fact, for most of his adult life, he was essentially homeless.
He basically lived with people, lived from couch to couch or person to person and girl to girl.
Daniel got one of those girls pregnant, but skipped out soon after the baby was born.
He always had warrants for child support.
And that was far from the only trouble Daniel got himself into.
He got a couple assault and batteries, resisting and obstructing. He had a marijuana charge.
His most recent trip to jail had been 2 months earlier, in May of 2016.
He had been arrested for larceny that the city police handled here in Monroe.
For the theft of a backpack, he'd barely spent a night in custody. But thanks to a recent change in state law, that was enough to get his DNA into the system.
Authorities were allowed to collect the DNA of people who were arrested for felonies.
It took a little bit, and then we were notified that his DNA did match the one on the costume.
Their first lead in almost 2 years, the investigators wasted no time in tracking Daniel down.
He was living in a mobile home park not far from where the party was.
But could they back up their DNA evidence with a confession? Hoping to get Daniel into the interrogation room before they revealed what they knew about Chelsea's murder, the investigators needed an excuse to bring him in. And thanks to Daniel's troubled past, they had no problem finding one.
He had a warrant for child support. So we were going to use that child support warrant to arrest him and bring him in.
And on July 22nd, everything was in place.
We had 2 deputies that went up, knocked on the door for probably 15 to 20 minutes.
Daniel didn't answer, though. He went out the back.
Daniel Clay tried to run, but was ultimately apprehended by deputies that were behind the residence.
The deputies placed Daniel in the back of a cruiser and drove him to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
He was under the assumption at that time that he was just being arrested for his child support warrant.
But after the investigators booked Daniel on the child support warrant, they sat him down for questioning and slowly, over the course of the interview, turned to the night of the Halloween party.
Have you ever heard of Chelsea Brock? Yeah, it's all over the news and stuff.
We told him that his name came up as attending the Halloween party that Chelsea went missing from.
Although, according to Daniel, he hadn't stayed long.
So you left at 10 o'clock or 11. Were you by yourself? Did you leave with anyone? I was by myself. Did you ever see Chelsea? Not that I know of. Like, I don't know who she was, so, you know, someone like that is just not going to stick out to me. Like, you know how many people were at that party?
What we do is we try to lock someone in a time frame into a story.
And then, once Daniel had told the investigators his version of what happened that night, the questioning took a confrontational turn.
What if I told you that your DNA was on her?
He was adamant that he had no contact with her, that he didn't know her, that he never saw her.
I will actually show you, all right, what I have from the crime lab. Okay. All right, and I'm telling you that your DNA is on there. I have no idea how. So we need to figure out how it got there. I have no idea.
Daniel quickly took advantage of the opening the investigator had offered.
It was a little turning point where maybe he did have sex with somebody in the back of a car at a party that night.
I honestly don't think it was her that I had sex with. But it's a possibility. Well, you said I'm saying it could be. I remember having sex with her, but she wasn't blonde. She had dark hair. Wasn't Chelsea blonde or something? She was wearing a wig. Oh, I didn't know that.
But even if it had been Chelsea in the back of the car, Daniel denied killing her.
Oh, she was fine and breathing when I left her. She got out of the car and walked away.
Although by then, the investigators were growing tired of Daniel's denials.
Look at me. Look at me. No. Look at me. I didn't do anything. You had no intent. I had sex with Daniel. I was wasted. You had no intent. You had no intent to hurt her. I understand. But we need to do this. I know we need to do this right now. You had no intent. You understand? Yeah.
After insisting for a little bit that he wasn't sure how that happened and he had nothing to do with it, Mr. Clay then kind of broke down.
And as he broke down, his story changed again.
He says, I remember this chick walking down the side of the road, so I pulled over.
Yeah, I say to you. I said, I'm going. I'm like, you want to come with you? She's like, let's go.
Although, according to Daniel, Chelsea had been looking for more than just a ride home.
Daniel Clay claims that Chelsea wanted to have sex.
Daniel said that he'd driven Chelsea a few miles down the road and pulled over in a secluded spot.
They get in the back seat of the car. They begin to have sex.
Wild sex, according to Daniel.
She did get freaky. Explain to me freaky. Like biting me and smacking me, and I was choking her and smacking her.
It was what Chelsea wanted, according to Daniel.
He claims that Chelsea asked him to choke her.
But Daniel said that somehow, in the midst of the encounter, things took an unexpected and tragic turn.
For a minute, and then she kind of stopped and she went limp. And I'm like, you know, and I started tapping her face, and but I guess I choked her too hard or something. I wasn't even choking her that hard, I didn't think.
He pulls her out of the car. He tries to perform CPR.
She didn't respond, nothing, like there was no pulse.
Chelsea Bruck was dead. And according to Daniel, he was panicked.
Daniel Clay said that he was intoxicated by drugs and alcohol, he wasn't thinking right, and decided to get rid of the body. He never considered taking her to the hospital, but he just began to drive around. And he eventually just, while driving around, he came across an area where he had previously went for drives to smoke marijuana and decided that would be the place to get rid of the body.
You pull her out of that car and you put her in that place. What happened then? I sat there, I cried my ass off for like 20 minutes.
Daniel's confession fit with much of what the investigators already knew, but not everything.
He never described how the injuries occurred to Chelsea's face.
And the discrepancy between Daniel's confession and what they knew about the extent of Chelsea's injuries was more than enough for the authorities to charge him with murder.
There's more to what Daniel Clay told us that happened that night.
Coming up, Daniel tells the rest of his story from the witness stand.
He thought maybe she just passed out on him.
But can the defense explain Chelsea's horrific injuries?
The fractures to the skull could well have been caused after death.
On May 8, 2017, 28-year-old Daniel Clay went on trial at Michigan's Monroe County Courthouse for the murder of Chelsea Bruck.
The courtroom was packed. This was a girl who was well loved by the community. She had a lot of friends.
We all just wanted to know what he said in that interview room and hear what he had to say.
It had been almost a year since Daniel had confessed to killing Chelsea after a Halloween party in 2014.
He told authorities that this was an accident, that he didn't mean for it to happen.
And he still stood by his claim. In fact, shortly before the trial was set to begin, Daniel and his defense attorneys turned down the offer of a 35-year sentence in return for pleading guilty to second-degree murder.
We believe that this case represented a manslaughter case, that Daniel Clay's actions as described in his testimony represented a consensual sex act gone awry.
However, in their opening statement, the prosecutors argued that the presence of Daniel's DNA on Chelsea's torn leotard told a very different story.
The costume was shown to the jury, and it was apparent that there was some trauma that had occurred. The straps to the costume and the crotch were completely severed. This was a murder committed during the course of a felony offense, criminal sexual conduct.
Criminal sexual conduct. It's what we call rape here in Michigan.
And according to the prosecution, the alleged rape was only the beginning of the trauma that Chelsea suffered.
If this was consensual, then why did she have all of these injuries?
According to the medical examiner's testimony, Chelsea had a broken jaw, missing teeth, and a fractured orbital socket.
The cause of death was determined to be multiple blunt force blows to the face.
Instantly, when you hear that, you know it's not an accident. It was a vicious beating.
And according to the medical examiner's testimony, that wasn't all that argued against Chelsea's death being a tragic accident, as Daniel claimed.
He claimed that she died even though he had choked her only a total of 20 to 30 seconds, and that she had been responsive for 15 seconds. If you do the math on that, that means that she had died only 15 seconds after losing consciousness. The medical testimony at trial, however, concluded that you would have to strangle somebody, manually strangle someone, hard enough to cut off all air or blood flow to the brain for an additional 2 minutes post-loss of consciousness.
To drive the point home, the prosecutors staged what they hoped would be a powerful demonstration.
The chief prosecutor presented a CPR mannequin to demonstrate to the jury, even if you bought Daniel Clay's story that he had asphyxiated her accidentally during a consensual sexual act, the amount of time it would take to actually kill someone via strangulation. So he sat in front of that jury for 2.5 minutes, holding his hands around the mannequin's neck.
Daniel Clay's story is not credible. There's no way that he could have strangled Chelsea to death in only 15 seconds.
And according to the prosecution, that made Daniel guilty of murder.
The prosecutor's theory was that Mr. Clay sexually assaulted Ms. Bruck. And because he did that, you could then infer that he was guilty without finding that he deliberately, intentionally premeditated the death of Chelsea Bruck.
But would the jury agree? When it was the defense's turn, the jurors got the chance to hear Daniel's story firsthand from the witness stand.
Daniel Clay testified at trial. He did his best to explain to the jury what happened that day.
He was fairly calm and collected.
And he stuck by his story that Chelsea's death was an accident.
Daniel Clay claimed that this was something that was consensual between the two of them, and he had no intention of hurting this young woman.
In fact, Daniel testified that since they were both intoxicated on the night of the party, it took him a minute to even realize that he had hurt Chelsea.
He said at first he thought maybe she just passed out on him.
And Daniel claimed that when he couldn't wake her, he'd tried to save her.
He said at that point he tried to do CPR, however, she was unresponsive and lifeless.
However, as the prosecution pointed out on cross-examination, there was one thing that Daniel didn't do: call 911.
That is something that the prosecution really hammered him on. You know, if this was an accident, why didn't you just immediately report this to the police to try and get help?
Mr. Clay indicated that his cell phone was dead. He could not have called for help at that time.
But even if all that was true, how did the defense explain Chelsea's horrific injuries?
Our experts at the trial indicated that the injuries to the skull could have occurred up to 3 hours after death.
Either when Daniel drug Chelsea's body out of the car.
One of the explanations was that he may have slammed her head in the car door.
Or after Daniel had thrown Chelsea's body into the shallow depression that served as her makeshift grave.
He says that once he dumped her body, he took some leaves and some sticks and logs and covered her body.
Our expert testified that the fractures to the skull could well have been caused by a log fallen on the corpse after death. That would explain the injuries that were present in the skull of Chelsea Bruck.
The defense's medical expert also challenged the autopsy's conclusion about cause of death. According to the defense, because Chelsea had been drinking that night, her death could easily have been the result of the brief choking that Daniel described.
Medical expert testimony at the trial indicated that death through deprivation of oxygen and blood flow to the brain could be shortened through intoxication.
And finally, the defense explained just why Daniel had choked Chelsea in the first place.
Chelsea died during what we call erotic asphyxiation.
Erotic asphyxiation is when the participants in sexual activity engage in depriving the other of oxygen to heighten their orgasm experience.
And according to the defense's closing argument, that meant Daniel wasn't the monster and sexual predator that the prosecution made him out to be.
What he did was dumb. But it wasn't any of the things that are necessary to find a first-degree premeditated murder.
Coming up, will the verdict finally bring peace for Chelsea's family?
We really wanted them to have some closure.
Or will their quest for justice end in another tragic loss?
It was heartbreaking to see their reaction.
On May 16, 2017, the jury announced that they had reached a verdict in the trial of Daniel Clay. The 28-year-old was charged with the murder of Chelsea Bruck after a wild Halloween party in 2014.
We don't know Daniel Clay's intent, whether he went to the party looking to do this to somebody.
At trial, the prosecutors argued that Daniel had murdered Chelsea in the midst of a sexual assault, making him guilty of felony murder.
We believe that the evidence on the leotard, as well as some of the statements that the defendant made during his interview warranted that.
But according to the defense, Daniel wasn't a monstrous predator stalking the party in search of victims. Instead, his attorney told the jury that Daniel was simply a drunken kid, guilty of nothing more than negligence and bad judgment.
I wanted them to find Daniel Clay guilty of 2 crimes, improper disposal of a corpse and manslaughter.
Would Daniel's claim that the sex was consensual and that the choking was Chelsea's idea be enough to convince the jury to find for manslaughter? All either side knew was that it had taken the jury a surprisingly short time to make a decision, less than 3 hours. Did the jury's quick decision bode well for the prosecutors or the defense?
We, the jury, find as follows. Felony murder, guilty. Count 2, concealing the death of an individual, guilty.
The jury found Mr. Clay guilty of felony murder.
Even if you believe Daniel Clay's story, the problem is that the evidence showed a beating.
For Chelsea's family, the verdict marked the end of an emotional ordeal that had lasted almost 3 years.
It was heartbreaking to see their reaction. I know it was a joyful reaction, but you know, how joyful can you be when you don't have your daughter?
Although as consolation, they knew that Daniel would never be free to prey on anyone again.
In Michigan, a conviction for first-degree felony murder calls for a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole.
Daniel accepted his fate without emotion.
He did not gasp, he did not cry.
The defendant himself, in a subsequent interview, actually described himself as being an effing monster.
And in a world where monsters are real, is anyone really safe?
There are predators out there. There's always someone, whether you feel it or not.
Our gut instinct did tell us that something wasn't right.
How do I explain that to her mother?
Do you have a conscience?
Maintaining the integrity of the evidentiary chain and establishing factual context. However, without Ashley's direct, detailed account, and critically, without any other direct witnesses to the terrifying incident, the investigative team found themselves facing a challenging, almost impossibly steep uphill battle in accurately reconstructing the precise narrative of what had truly occurred, because Ashley didn't give a statement and there were no witnesses. Law enforcement only could go based on what was found at the crime scene, Doug's body, and then what they could do through interviewing other people involved. A detective explained, laying bare the profound limitations and analytical difficulties imposed by the absence of a direct, primary narrative from the alleged perpetrator. The task, therefore, mutated from simply gathering information to one of meticulously piecing together a complex, potentially fragmented, and highly contentious puzzle from disparate, sometimes contradictory, fragments of information, both physical and testimonial. It became a painstaking exercise in forensic reconstruction and psychological profiling. Propelled by the authority of their duly issued search warrant, detectives immediately shifted their meticulous attention to the residence Ashley shared with her mother, recognizing it as the nexus of the escalating domestic conflict and the presumptive scene of the shooting. Crime scene technicians, possessing a forensic precision born of extensive training and experience, began their methodical, painstaking work of identifying and collecting even the most minute pieces of physical evidence. The crime scene technicians recovered spent shells in the bedroom an investigator reported, providing the initial, unequivocal evidence of gunshots being fired within the dwelling, a tangible proof of the violence. Further analysis quickly revealed a precise number of shots fired. There were 4 shots that were actually fired. This number, 4, suggested a greater level of intensity and, perhaps, an absence of the surgical precision often associated with purely reactive self-defense in a constrained, high-stress environment where 1 or 2 shots might typically suffice to neutralize an immediate threat. The repeated discharge raised immediate questions for the investigators regarding the extent of the alleged threat and the perceived necessity of repeated lethal force. The officers meticulously documented the physical layout and the contents of the room where Doug was found, creating a comprehensive snapshot of the immediate environment, freezing the scene in time for later analysis. There was a mattress, a hamper, and a backpack, the investigator enumerated. Within that particular backpack, a significant and potentially telling discovery was made, prompting immediate interest. Law enforcement found that in that backpack there was a firearm. However, subsequent forensic analysis and the recovery of the actual murder weapon quickly clarified its role. We knew it wasn't a murder weapon because we had the murder weapon indicating that the initial firearm used in the shooting had already been secured. But the mere presence of another weapon, casually stored in a backpack, was highly notable. But the discoveries of firearms continued, progressively painting an even more complex, indeed alarming, picture for the seasoned investigators. They also found another firearm in the pantry of the kitchen. The cumulative presence of multiple weapons, strategically, almost casually, placed within a home where a fatal shooting had just occurred, immediately raised profound suspicions among experienced law enforcement personnel. It was a red flag for law enforcement that this home was almost emptied, and yet there were 3 firearms, an investigator reflected, highlighting the striking incongruity between the apparent state of the house, suggesting an imminent move, or perhaps a sudden departure from the premises, and the concentrated presence of lethal weaponry. The general sparsity of the house's furnishings, coupled with this unusual concentration of firearms, began to strongly suggest a pre-existing state of readiness, a pronounced preparedness for, or perhaps even an expectation of, a violent confrontation. The fact that there was nothing else in the house seemed to indicate that maybe they were expecting a problem, the investigator concluded, a chilling hypothesis that subtly but powerfully shifted the interpretative framework of the situation from one of purely reactive self-defense to one potentially tinged with premeditation or, at least, proactive preparation for conflict, suggesting forethought. Further diligent investigation meticulously revealed the clear chain of ownership for these weapons. One of the firearms belonged to Ashley's mother, and 2 of the firearms belonged to Ashley, directly linking Ashley to multiple potential weapons, further adding to the growing complexity of her evolving narrative and her claimed vulnerability in the face of alleged danger. The presence of these weapons indicated a readiness for confrontation. Perhaps one of the most crucial, indeed profoundly telling, pieces of objective forensic evidence emerged concerning the victim himself, directly and powerfully challenging any narrative of him as an imminent, armed, or lethal threat. Doug was absolutely unarmed, the investigator emphasized with categorical certainty, leaving no room for doubt or ambiguity. He had no guns or weapons of any kind on his person. The meticulous search extended beyond mere visual inspection. It delved into his most personal effects, ensuring a thorough and complete assessment. He didn't even have his wallet with him. The mundane, everyday details of his attire further underscored a complete and utter unpreparedness for a violent, potentially lethal confrontation. He's wearing his flip-flops like he always does. He's wearing a t-shirt. This image of Doug, casually dressed, in everyday wear, without even a basic personal item like a wallet, and crucially, without any discernible means of self-defense, stood in stark and undeniable contrast to the potential need for lethal force, as described in a classic, justifiable self-defense scenario where an aggressor poses an armed threat and the victim must respond with immediate, overwhelming force. He doesn't have anything on him, nothing to defend himself, the investigator concluded, delivering a damning blow to any assertion that Doug represented an immediate, armed, mortal threat requiring Ashley's drastic and lethal use of firearm. The lack of any offensive capability on Doug's person will become a cornerstone of the prosecution's argument, challenging the credibility of any self-defense claim based on an armed aggressor. Other cascading aspects of the case, unfolding rapidly through witness interviews and background checks, only serve to deepen the investigators' already considerable skepticism regarding the quickly coalescing narrative of pure self-defense and Ashley's claimed victimization. The almost instantaneous arrival of Dr. Barbara Russell, a therapist specifically specializing in domestic violence cases, particularly raised eyebrows within seasoned law enforcement circles. The fact that a therapist was on the scene within minutes is unheard of. A veteran detective noted, underscoring the extraordinary and highly unusual timing, well before the typical procedural responses to such a severe incident would normally allow for such a specific intervention. Dr. Russell, in her own statement to the authorities, elucidated the sequence of her unexpected presence, a detail that further reinforced the impression of a highly coordinated, rather than purely spontaneous, response to a crisis. I received a phone call from Ashley's family law attorney. She asked me to please go over to the house to check on Ashley's mother. This direct, immediate link to Ashley's legal team, almost simultaneously with the shooting itself, firmly underscored the perception among investigators of a prepared, tactical legal response rather than an organic, crisis-driven act of compassion. Dr. Russell further expressed her own initial surprise upon arriving, which inadvertently lent an unintended but significant layer of credibility to the investigators. Growing suspicion regarding Ashley's initial narrative. She reiterated that her mom had thought that it was Ashley who had been killed. I was absolutely shocked to hear that Doug was the one who had been shot. This genuine surprise from an involved professional further highlighted the profound disjunct between initial appearances and the shocking, grim reality that awaited them. As investigators diligently pursued every lead, meticulously cross-referencing information, and systematically examining past police reports involving the couple, they began to uncover a pattern of behavior from Ashley that fundamentally and critically challenged her perceived credibility, raising serious questions about her honesty and consistency. Law enforcement started speaking to other law enforcement officers who had dealt with Ashley in the past, a standard and invaluable practice in complex, high-stakes investigations to ascertain a comprehensive historical profile of individuals involved, understanding their past conduct and any relevant behavioral patterns. What they meticulously learned from these inquiries was profoundly telling and decisively shifted their initial assessment. They learned that she was less credible than they initially thought she was, revealing a history of unreliability and potential fabrication in her claims. One particular police report, filed by Ashley in the year 2017, stood out as a stark and indeed audacious example of her alleged penchant for dramatic and unproven accusations. In this alarming instance, she was convinced Doug was trying to kill her and the baby, an allegation of a truly malevolent and murderous intent, particularly chilling given her pregnant state and the vulnerability of an unborn child. The specifics of her accusation were both theatrical and deeply unsettling. He sent her a birthday gift, which was tea, an investigator explained, outlining the mundane object at the heart of the dramatic claim. She claimed that it smelled funny when she opened the package, and she thought that it may have poison in it. The severity and inherent danger of such an allegation, implying an attempt at poisoning a pregnant woman, triggered an immediate and extensive emergency response from local authorities. diverting significant public resources, and mobilizing specialized teams trained for high-risk situations. I contacted the bomb squad and hazmat team that came out to inspect the box and analyze it for what was inside. The responding officer from that past incident recounted, detailing the serious official reaction to Ashley's claims, demonstrating how seriously such accusations are taken by law enforcement. The conclusive findings, after extensive and rigorous testing of the tea, were unequivocal and profoundly deflating for Ashley's narrative. Ultimately, they'd find that there was nothing malicious about this package of tea. The tea, conclusively, was simply tea, an innocuous gift devoid of sinister intent. Ashley's reaction to this definitive scientific debunking of her sensational claim was highly illuminating and deeply concerning to the investigators. Ashley was not happy that law enforcement was not going to arrest Doug. Her discontent, rather than relief at being safe, suggested not a citizen whose fears were assuaged, but a frustrated manipulator whose carefully constructed narrative had failed to yield the desired legal consequence, namely Doug's incarceration. The meticulous re-examination of Ashley's startling tea poisoning allegations, viewed through the chilling new lens of a fatal shooting, forced investigators to consider a profoundly disquieting possibility. Their primary analytical question now morphed into whether Ashley's tea poisoning allegations were intended to serve a different purpose. Looking back at the totality of her behaviors, the pattern that began to emerge strongly suggested a deliberate and carefully calculated strategy of systemic fabrication and emotional weaponization, rather than genuine paranoia or legitimate fear. Looking back at everything, it seemed she was trying to show everybody that he was such a bad person, and that he would try to do this to her and the baby. An investigator perceptively speculated, beginning to formulate a coherent hypothesis of intentional, long-term manipulation designed to discredit Doug. This specific incident, once dismissed as an unusual misunderstanding or severe overreaction, now appeared to be an early, audacious, and somewhat theatrical attempt by Ashley to establish a fabricated narrative, to create a public and institutional record of Doug as a dangerous, malevolent individual capable of even attempted murder, thus building a false case against him piece by insidious piece. The detective directly involved in that earlier incident succinctly summarized his enduring impression, which had now proven chillingly prophetic. At the conclusion of the interview with her that day, I definitely was left with the impression of, there's something going on here on both sides of this. Maybe she's not being 100% truthful. This nascent doubt, first seeded years prior by Ashley's theatricality and unsubstantiated claims, had now blossomed into full-blown, justified suspicion, informing the entire trajectory of the murder investigation and leading to a complete reevaluation of her character and motives. The stage for unmasking a deeper truth was set. As the narrative unfolded, meticulously revealing layers of marital discord and escalating accusations, Doug's loved one stepped forward, eager to offer a vastly different perspective on his character and the specific circumstances surrounding his death. The contrast between their deeply personal accounts and Ashley's pervasive, dramatic allegations was stark, almost jarring, highlighting a profound divergence in their understanding of the man. Coming up, Doug's loved ones cast further doubt on the circumstances of his death. These individuals, who had known Doug intimately for decades, who had shared his triumphs and sorrows, painted a consistent portrait of a man entirely at odds with the abusive figure Ashley meticulously described. Doug was being accused of things that were impossible, that he would never ever in a million years do, a family friend emphatically stated, his voice ringing with a profound sense of disbelief and offense at the emerging accusations, as if hearing an entirely foreign and false description of their beloved loved one. To them, Doug was not the controlling, violent aggressor of Ashley's narrative, but rather a loving man that took care of other people, a generous and compassionate individual, a true family man. This consistent counter-narrative, offered by multiple, credible sources from his inner circle, created a powerful and undeniable dissonance with Ashley's claims, forcing investigators to question the veracity of her entire story. Indeed, her entire manufactured history of alleged abuse, leading them down a path of increasing skepticism. All information that I got was a very different picture than one that Ashley had painted. A detective observed, acknowledging the increasingly bifurcated and irreconcilable understanding of Doug's fundamental character. According to those closest to Doug, the situation was fundamentally reversed. Ashley was not the victim she meticulously portrayed to law enforcement and the public, but rather, she herself was a problem, a source of constant conflict, emotional volatility, and cunning manipulation within the family dynamic. His older daughter, Eva, shared her profound and deeply personal insights with investigators, detailing how tensions within their household began almost immediately after Ashley had integrated herself into their lives, swiftly becoming a disruptive and divisive force. Eva vividly recalled Ashley's unsettling behaviors, describing an almost infantile emotional volatility that undermined any sense of peace or familial harmony. She said that Ashley would throw tantrums and seem jealous of Eva, painting a disconcerting picture of a household fraught with rivalry and thinly veiled emotional manipulation, a clear sign of immaturity and insecurity. The alleged jealousy, Eva recounted, extended far beyond mere superficial competition for attention, reaching into the fundamental, almost sacred bond between father and daughter. She didn't want Doug to choose Eva over her, indicating a deeply possessive and insecure personality trait, a desire for exclusive affection from Doug. Eva's deeply unsettling testimony, however, revealed far more disturbing and insidious patterns of behavior than mere jealousy. She bravely confided in investigators that Ashley's relentless jealousy and possessiveness extended even to the revered and cherished memory of Eva's tragically deceased mother, Renee. Ashley came in, and she wanted to get rid of Renee. Eva recounted with a chilling sense of affront and bewilderment, describing a profound and disturbing agenda, an almost psychological exorcism of a past rival. This profound desire to systematically erase Renee's presence from Doug's life and their shared home manifested in concrete, deliberate actions that deeply distressed Eva and demonstrated Ashley's comprehensive strategy of erasure. She didn't want Renee's pictures. She didn't want Renee's home decor. Such attempts to systematically expunge the cherished memory of a deceased wife and mother are, from a criminal psychology perspective, deeply troubling indicators of an intense proprietary claim over Doug, signaling a profound insecurity and an almost pathological drive to eliminate all perceived rivals, even those existing only in memory, ensuring her own unchallenged centrality in Doug's affections and life. Most shockingly, and providing a stark insight into the truly alarming lengths of Ashley's alleged deception, Eva reported to law enforcement an allegation so profoundly preposterous, so vile in its calumny, that it unveiled the potential depths of Ashley's perceived malice and manipulative genius. Ashley told her she needed to stay away from her father because her father had also killed her mother. This outrageous and unfounded fabrication, accusing Doug of fratricide and an almost unimaginable act against Renee, was not an isolated incident. Instead, Ashley leveraged this horrifying lie to its extreme, attempting to initiate official legal action against Doug regarding Renee's past. Ashley also went as far as contacting law enforcement and trying to get Renee's body exhumed, because she was making allegations that Doug had also poisoned Renee. This extreme act of desperation, accusing Doug of poisoning his first wife, was particularly insidious and monstrous given the unequivocal medical facts surrounding Renee's death, which had already been officially documented by competent authorities. At the time, South Carolina police had confirmed with the coroner that Renee died of natural causes. Ashley's relentless persistence in advancing this demonstrably false accusation, despite official refutation, was deeply unsettling and spoke volumes about her determined character. She never stopped doing that on a regular basis. This consistent pattern of unfounded, sensational accusations profoundly troubled the seasoned investigators, serving as a powerful corroboration of their growing suspicions about Ashley's calculated deception and profound capacity for manipulation. Ashley consistently would accuse Doug of things that many times were not true and were unprovable. A detective summarized with a weary conviction, painting a portrait of a woman alarmingly adept at manufacturing elaborate and damaging narratives to serve her own singular ends, meticulously laying the groundwork for her eventual tragic actions. When detectives meticulously reviewed the extensive and complex court filings pertaining to the tumultuous and protracted marital dissolution and the bitter subsequent custody disputes, they discovered a more nuanced and psychologically complex picture of the relationship's pathology. Intriguingly, some of Ashley's accusations, surprisingly, did possess a foundational basis in reality, offering momentary fragments of truth. However, these legitimate incidents had, in virtually every instance, been dramatically amplified to support her depiction of Doug. This critical distinction was profound. It revealed that Ashley was not necessarily fabricating everything from whole cloth, a blanket of pure lies. Instead, she was masterfully distorting, exaggerating, and weaponizing genuine moments of marital strife, instances of Doug's admitted poor judgment and flashes of anger, to strategically bolster her overarching narrative of him as a relentlessly abusive and dangerous individual. It is clear that Doug did some things that would not be appropriate. An investigator conceded with professional objectivity, refusing to paint Doug as an entirely blameless, angelic figure in a contentious marriage. Justice demands an objective view of all parties, acknowledging human fallibility. Doug himself, remarkably, had addressed some of these very behaviors directly and candidly in a sworn deposition, providing invaluable insight into his own admitted regrettable actions, a rare moment of transparent self-accountability under oath. Doug, in a deposition, talked about some of these behaviors that she was accusing him of. One specific incident involved property damage, a clear display of uncontrolled, frustrated anger. One of them was punching holes in the walls. He admitted he punched holes in the wall one time in South Carolina. Another disturbing revelation involved the reckless discharge of firearm, a profoundly serious act even in a moment of emotional duress, one that could have had dire consequences. He also talked about the shooting of the gun into the ceiling. He said he did that out of frustration. These were clear and unequivocal instances of poor judgment and moments where Doug allowed his emotions to catastrophically get the better of him, resulting in regrettable acts of aggression that certainly contributed to the marital discord. He made poor choices and let his emotions get the best of him. However, the investigators also emphasized a critical and morally profound distinction between these regrettable past actions and the ultimate, irreversible act of lethal force. But those things not only were separated in time, but still don't warrant Ashley's shooting and killing him years later. The acknowledged moments of Doug's aggression, while certainly inappropriate, deeply regrettable, and indicative of significant marital discord, did not, in the professional judgment of law enforcement and through the rigorous lens of legal justification, constitute a direct, immediate, and mortal threat that would rationally justify the premeditated, lethal use of force years later, especially under the very specific and forensically contradictory circumstances observed at the actual crime scene. The passage of time and the vastly different context of the actions made a crucial legal and moral difference, rendering the justification for lethal force highly questionable and raising red flags about Ashley's true motives. The precise timing of Ashley's most sensational and ultimately discredited accusation, the alleged poisoning with tea, garnered particular and intense investigative interest as detectives sought to establish a chronological pattern of her manipulative behaviors, tracing the arc of her strategic deceptions. This significant incident occurred in the spring of 2018. Critically, just prior to this dramatic event, Doug had reached out to his legal team, signaling his proactive intent to engage constructively in the relationship's rapidly approaching new phase, the impending birth of their child. Doug reached out to my law firm to set up an appointment to discuss options for reaching out to Ashley because he and Ashley were getting ready to have their baby. His attorney recounted, her words emphasizing Doug's genuine desire for paternal involvement and responsibility. A seemingly positive development, this specific contextual detail was crucial. It indicated that Doug was actively attempting to establish a connection and claim his rightful involvement in the impending birth and the life of his unborn child, not to abandon them. Ashley's reaction to this, viewed retrospectively and through the accumulating evidence, was immediate, dramatic, and overtly strategic. She went into Tampa General Hospital the very next day after she got my email. Once admitted to the hospital, her narrative was clear, alarming, and aimed squarely at isolating Doug from their child, creating a fabricated basis for exclusion. Ashley tells the nurses she's been poisoned and that she wants to deliver her baby. This dramatic self-reporting, steeped in false accusations against Doug, culminated in an expedited medical procedure. She ultimately ends up getting induced and then delivering her daughter. The rapid delivery, following such sensational claims, became part of her manufactured narrative of victimhood and perceived immediate danger from Doug, establishing an early, damning, and false record. The subsequent actions Ashley took regarding her newborn daughter further solidified the investigative theory of a carefully orchestrated, systematic manipulation designed to assert absolute control and legally distance Doug from the child. Ashley not only doesn't put a father down on the birth certificate, she also doesn't give their daughter Doug's name. These were not mere oversights born of oversight or postpartum confusion, but deliberate and highly consequential legal choices that fundamentally impacted Doug's legal and paternal rights, systematically attempting to erase his connection and recognition as the child's father from official records. It became chillingly clear to investigators that Ashley used the alleged poisoning to keep Doug from seeing the child for 6 months until he took her to court. This protracted and legally unjustifiable denial of access to his own child, based on fabricated threats, forced Doug into an arduous, expensive legal battle merely to establish and defend his fundamental paternal rights, demonstrating Ashley's tenacity and ruthlessness in preventing his involvement. The judge presiding over the bitter and prolonged custody dispute, after meticulously reviewing all presented evidence, including the investigative findings on the thoroughly debunked poison tea claim, rendered a critically significant judgment regarding Ashley's overall credibility. The judge, after hearing the evidence, said that there was no evidence that there was any poisoning and that Ashley was not a credible witness. This unequivocal judicial pronouncement, systematically casting severe doubt on Ashley's truthfulness in an official legal setting, represented a profound turning point in the family's prolonged disputes and, crucially, served as a highly incriminating piece of historical evidence for the subsequent murder investigation, effectively stripping her the aura of victimhood she had sought to cultivate. This judicial determination directly counteracted Ashley's desperate efforts to maintain sole control, leading to a ruling that affirmed Doug's rights. And she ends up giving Doug visitation with his child. Ultimately, they had to figure out time sharing and work out co-parenting on the weekends. This was a significant legal setback for Ashley, a direct challenge to her control, and a devastating blow to her fabricated narratives. Over the ensuing 2 years, as Doug and Ashley were reluctantly compelled by court order to navigate the inherent complexities of co-parenting, often a challenging enough endeavor even under amicable circumstances, Ashley's pattern of escalating accusations became increasingly stark, desperate, and even audacious, demonstrating a relentless determination to regain full control over their daughter. Initially, She said he was doing abusive things to her, an investigator summarized, recalling the initial self-serving focus of her claims of personal victimhood against Doug. And then, when that didn't work, she changed to abusive behaviors towards a child. This calculated and deeply disturbing shift in the target of her allegations, from herself to their shared daughter, represented a severe and morally reprehensible escalation. Such claims invariably trigger the most rigorous and immediate attention from law enforcement, involving specialized child protection units. A stark truth Ashley undoubtedly understood and was exploiting for maximum legal leverage. Law enforcement takes domestics very serious, the detective emphasized. Claims of abuse against children, they investigate these cases to their fullest, deploying all available resources to verify or refute such grave charges with the utmost diligence and a commitment to child safety. However, despite the intense scrutiny and comprehensive investigations triggered by these profoundly serious allegations, the diligent efforts of multiple agencies consistently yielded the same result, undermining Ashley's claims at every turn. We found there was never any evidence that Doug did any crimes against a child. To the seasoned investigators, this consistent absence of any corroborating evidence for child abuse, particularly after such exhaustive inquiries and extensive efforts, strongly suggested a profoundly disturbing and deeply manipulative motive behind Ashley's relentless campaign of accusation. To investigators, it suggests Ashley was willing to do anything to retain sole custody of their child. The detective concluded, his voice heavy with the grim realization of her unwavering, almost pathological, intent. She was hell-bent and was willing to make almost any allegation she could to make that happen. The portrait emerging was not one of a terrified, truly victimized individual, but of a woman ruthlessly determined to eliminate all obstacles, including legal ones, to her singular, absolute control over her daughter, revealing a chilling, calculating nature behind her every accusation. This stark realization and the intricate web of deceit and manipulation that had been meticulously uncovered fundamentally transformed the central investigative question from a mere search for objective truth into a profound, ethically charged and deeply troubling psychological query. Was she fearing for her life, or was she executing a thorough plot to start her own life without Doug in the picture now? The meticulously documented, long-term pattern of false allegations, coupled with the critical absence of any immediate, demonstrable physical threat to Ashley at the actual crime scene, began to coalesce, painting an increasingly sinister and highly incriminating picture for the investigators. Detectives investigating Doug Benefield's tragic death now believe with growing conviction, supported by compelling circumstantial evidence and behavioral analysis, that Ashley Benefield might indeed be attempting to cover up a carefully constructed murder plot, a scheme that had been meticulously, albeit subconsciously or consciously, years in the making, and strategically timed for a crucial moment. The why was becoming agonizingly clear. Their suspicions were definitively affirmed and given a chilling specificity when they consulted with Doug's attorney, an individual intimately familiar with the protracted, bitter legal struggle for custody. The attorney delivered a critical, indeed devastating, piece of information, a bombshell that inextricably linked the shooting to a powerful, immediate, and utterly compelling motive, providing the final, grim, and clarifying piece of the investigative puzzle. September 30th, just 3 days after the homicide occurs. There was a hearing scheduled with the family law judge to find out if Doug gets more custody of this child, the attorney revealed, her words imbued with a tragic awareness of the causal chain now visibly connecting the shooting to this imminent court date. They were going to go back before this judge, who seemingly did not believe anything Ashley said. This was the crucible, the impending legal confrontation, the precise judicial tipping point that Ashley, having systematically exhausted all other avenues of obstruction, defamation, and accusation, clearly feared above all else, more than anything, This imminent hearing represented an undeniable, credible threat to her absolute, singular control over their daughter, a prospect she had fought tooth and nail, by any and all means necessary, to prevent for years on end. It was a moment of ultimate leverage or ultimate defeat, and in Ashley's mind, perhaps a moment that justified ultimate action. The timing of the shooting, therefore, ceased to be merely coincidental. It became devastatingly, horrifically incriminating, transforming mere suspicion into compelling motive. Ashley's inability to manipulate the courts any further, combined with the crushing burden of a looming judicial decision that would undoubtedly favor Doug, given the judge's established and vocal skepticism of her past claims, pushed her to a precipice from which she evidently saw no other escape, no other means to secure her desired outcome. The phrase, "she didn't know what else to do," uttered by someone close to her and offered as a potential explanation for her actions, was viewed by seasoned prosecutors as less a genuine justification born of terror and more a desperate, self-serving rationalization for an ultimate, irreversible act of violence born of frustration and impending legal defeat. I think it just got to that point where she snapped, was the interpretation often presented. However, the prosecution would meticulously argue that a snap born profound legal frustration and impending loss of control, a breakdown under pressure of her own making, differs fundamentally and morally from a snap born of immediate, terror-inducing self-preservation in the face of an unavoidable mortal threat. This critical distinction became the very fulcrum upon which the prosecution's entire case would hinge, guiding the jury's understanding of intent and moral culpability. When faced with complex legal battle involving self-defense claims versus a charge of homicide, particularly when there is only one direct, undisputed account of the fatal events, that of the shooter, the task of establishing truth beyond a reasonable doubt becomes incredibly arduous and demanding. When there's only one side of the story, it makes it an incredibly tough job to argue self-defense versus homicide, a seasoned legal expert acknowledged, emphasizing the inherent evidentiary challenge that defense attorneys frequently exploit in such cases. To overcome this critical narrative imbalance and to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, detectives instinctively understood the paramount necessity of hard evidence, the immutable facts that transcend subjective emotional testimony and stand as irrefutable truth. They would need to construct an undeniable counter-narrative built on rigorous scientific principles and unyielding forensic certainty. The scientific proof would be their unwavering guide in the face of emotional appeal. The most critical pieces of that hard, objective evidence emerged from a painstaking and rigorous forensic analysis of the crime scene and, crucially, from Doug Benefield's body itself, speaking the silent language of scientific fact. They took Doug's shirt from the crime scene and analyzed that shirt for any residue from a bullet or gunpowder, a meticulously critical step in ballistics and distance analysis that provides crucial information about the shooting event. The findings from this exhaustive forensic examination were starkly definitive and highly significant for the defense's claims. There was no stippling found on either the clothing or the body of Doug Benefield. Stippling, for the uninitiated, is the unmistakable pattern of unburned or partially burned gunpowder particles, as well as soot, that impact the skin or clothing when a firearm is discharged at extremely close range, typically within an arm's length or slightly more, a definitive marker of proximity. Its complete absence was not a minor detail. It was an irrefutable and profoundly powerful indicator of the minimum distance between the firearm and the victim at the precise moment of discharge, based on the compelling and conclusive lack of any stippling. The forensic experts were able to make a critical determination regarding the distance from which the shots were fired. They were able to determine that the firearm was potentially 6 feet away from his body. This finding alone dramatically, indeed catastrophically, undermined Ashley's anticipated self-defense narrative, which would almost invariably depict a desperate struggle at incredibly close quarters. Hand-to-hand combat where distance is eliminated. If Doug were coming at Ashley, you would think they would be much closer than 6 feet. A detective reasoned with stark common sense, highlighting the vast and undeniable discrepancy between the physical evidence and the expected dynamics of a life-or-death struggle fought within arm's length, where proximity is inherently unavoidable and often involves contact. The physical facts simply did not align with a close-quarter struggle or an immediate threat. Further, unassailable forensic clarity was provided by Doug's autopsy report, which offered irrefutable information regarding the precise trajectory of the fatal bullet within his body. The trajectory of the fatal bullet was from the right side of Doug's chest. An investigator announced, detailing precise path of destruction wrought by the projectile. This specific entry point, this particular angle of impact, carried profound and deeply damning implications for accurately interpreting the dynamics of the shooting. This likely indicated that he wasn't coming directly at her in the sense of an attack. The investigator posited, systematically dismantling the foundational premise of a self-defense claim where an aggressor is, advancing head-on, directly threatening the shooter. Instead, the angle of the bullet strongly suggested a different scenario, one far removed from a frontal assault. He was probably turning around. This scenario implied that Doug might have been in the process of attempting to disengage, to flee the confrontation, or simply had his back or side partially turned to Ashley at the precise, fatal moment of impact. This collection of unequivocal forensic details, both the telling lack of stippling and the precise bullet trajectory, converged powerfully to unequivocally put into question whether or not her use of lethal force was actually necessary in that moment. The silent, irrefutable language of the physical evidence, meticulously gathered and scientifically analyzed, spoke volumes, constructing a powerful, objective counter-narrative that stood in stark and unyielding opposition to Ashley's presumed claim of immediate and unavoidable self-defense. We would expect to see X, Y, and Z pieces of evidence to indicate that this was truly self-defense. A prosecutor later explained, referring to the common, predictable indicators of close-range struggle and direct threat, such as defensive wounds or closer firing distances. And everything put together really says this doesn't significant, true, justified self-defense. The cold, hard facts painted a grim picture of doubt regarding Ashley's claims, leaving little room for subjective interpretation. With the formidable weight of the physical evidence overwhelmingly contradicting a close-range, direct self-defense scenario, and with the meticulously compiled psychological profile strongly suggesting a deeply rooted motive, directly connected to the impending, crucial custody battle and a long, troubling history of calculated manipulation, the intricate legal noose began to inexorably tighten around Ashley Benefield. The walls of her fabricated narrative were crumbling under the relentless assault of truth and evidence. On the 4th of November, in the year 2020, a mere 5 weeks after the fatal shooting that had shattered the tranquility of Lakewood Ranch, Ashley Benefield was formally arrested and subsequently charged with the grave offense of second-degree murder, the judicial system finally taking decisive action against her. The arrest ignited an immediate and intense firestorm of media attention, transcending local interest and quickly captivating national headlines with its compelling and sensational details. The story, a captivating and often sensational blend of youthful beauty, a background in professional ballet, and the stark, grim reality of deadly domestic violence, quickly seized the public imagination with an almost irresistible force. The media, ever astute at assigning a memorable and catchy moniker that captured the essence of the unfolding drama, wasted little time in dubbing her the Black Swan, a poignant and evocative reference that simultaneously conjured images of her elegant past as a ballerina and, tragically, subtly underscored the sinister and morally ambiguous undertones of her alleged heinous crime. She's a beautiful girl who is a ballerina and now is accused of a heinous crime. A legal analyst observed, articulating the very paradox that fueled intense public fascination: the dramatic contrast between her former life and her present accusations. This high-profile notoriety and the evocative imagery it conjured inevitably does affect the case, creating a powerful and often emotionally charged public discourse that, for better or worse, could potentially sway perceptions and influence opinions even before the meticulously structured, formal trial proceedings had even commenced, adding another layer of complexity to the pursuit of justice. Public opinion, fueled by media portrayals, can be a fickle thing. In the fraught and tense days leading up to the long-anticipated trial, Ashley's steadfast loved ones, fiercely propelled by an unwavering belief in her innocence and a passionate desire to see justice, served as they perceived it, rallied to her defense with an almost extraordinary zeal and commitment, making their presence known to the court and the public. An impressive army of supporters marched outside the courthouse, their collective presence a palpable and undeniable demonstration of solidarity, conviction, and emotional support for Ashley. They skillfully employed various means to amplify their message and broadcast their unwavering belief in Ashley's victimization, utilizing bullhorns out there chanting things like, "We stand with Ashley," and trying to raise awareness about what was going on, seeking to sway public opinion and influence potential jurors before the trial even began. This concerted and highly visible public relations effort, meticulously designed and executed, sought to profoundly shape the public narrative, to ensure that Ashley was primarily seen as a deeply traumatized victim, not a cold-blooded villain, to be universally portrayed as a desperate woman driven to ultimate and unavoidable measures by a relentlessly abusive and dangerous estranged husband. The battle for public perception waged vigorously and dramatically even before the courtroom doors officially opened, setting the stage for a contentious legal battle where narratives would clash. The formal trial itself commenced on the 23rd July in the year 2024, an event meticulously prepared for by both the formidable prosecution team and Ashley's equally determined defense attorneys, Ashley's legal representatives. Undoubtedly keenly aware of the significant public sympathy and narrative leverage their supporters had diligently cultivated outside the courtroom, deftly utilized those very grounds to their strategic advantage within the formal proceedings. The defense made it very clear this was a case of self-defense and that Ashley didn't have a choice but to shoot and kill Doug, a straightforward and uncompromising articulation of their core legal strategy, portraying her actions as an absolute, unavoidable necessity to save her own life. They presented Ashley's consistent statements to various individuals as genuine, unadulterated expressions of profound and inescapable fear. Ashley said on multiple occasions that she was afraid for her safety, that she was afraid for her life. The formidable challenge facing the prosecution was to systematically dismantle this carefully constructed narrative of terror and desperation without, in the process, appearing to unfairly demonize a woman who, on the surface and to many in the public eye, garnered considerable empathy and understanding due to her perceived vulnerability and emotional distress, a delicate balance to strike. Our way to combat that is to try and show that we had a motive, the prosecutor explained, reiterating the powerful constellation of evidence gathered about the looming, crucial custody dispute, which presented a compelling alternative motive. We had a history. We had a pattern of behavior on her part. The tactical and ethical challenge to the prosecution was nuanced and demanding. We were very concerned about alienating a jury or making them think we were picking on Ashley when, in fact, we're just trying to show that she's been telling tales. Their objective was not personal attack, but rigorous evidentiary truth, revealing a consistent pattern of deceptive storytelling designed to achieve specific outcomes. The climax of the week-long trial arrived with an entirely unexpected, indeed profoundly dramatic, twist that fundamentally shifted the entire equilibrium of the proceedings. For months leading up to the trial, Ashley had steadfastly invoked her constitutional right to remain silent, resolutely refusing to provide a direct, detailed account of the fatal shooting to law enforcement or the prosecution. Now, in a strategic and profoundly risky move that fundamentally altered the trial's established trajectory and ratcheted up the dramatic tension to an almost unbearable level, she unilaterally decided to testify in her own defense, to speak directly to the jury, to deliver her own narrative to the very people who would decide her fate. Ashley is the only one who knows for certain what happened that night, and so far she's refused to talk, a legal observer had noted, articulating the collective anticipation and speculation surrounding her prolonged silence. But now, as she was solemnly called to the witness stand, a palpable hush descended upon the courtroom, and the entire dynamic of the trial completely shifted. A profound sense of gravity permeated the air, signaling the pivotal moment of her direct address, a make-or-break gamble that demanded all eyes and ears. We all kind of knew, now it's going to get real, a lawyer intimately involved in the proceedings recounted, acknowledging the immense and undeniable significance of her decision to finally break her silence, for better or worse, and to tell her own story from the witness box. For the very first time since she pulled the trigger on her estranged husband in September 2020, Ashley Benefield stood before the court and dramatically broke her profound 4-year silence. From the witness stand, her voice wavering with emotion, she embarked upon an elaborate, highly theatrical account, meticulously walking the jurors through her emotional version of what she claimed transpired on that fateful night. Ashley and her mother were in the process of moving. She began meticulously setting the scene, emphasizing the transitional period they were undergoing, an inherently stressful and potentially volatile time. She asserted that Doug insisted that he help with the packing, presenting his presence as an unwanted intrusion into their private affairs. Not a helpful gesture. Ashley's testimony then meticulously detailed what she claimed was a chilling and escalating sequence of aggression. She alleged that Doug relentlessly tried to force a reconciliation, an overture she consistently rebuffed with clear refusals. And he wouldn't take no for an answer, she asserted, vividly describing his perceived persistent, unwanted advances and escalating pressure, framing it as harassment and a clear boundary violation. The situation, in her recounting, catastrophically spiraled into a physical confrontation. He wouldn't let me leave. I tried to leave. He stopped me. He was standing in the doorway, she claimed, depicting a scenario of physical confinement and intimidation, presenting herself as trapped. The alleged verbal threats intensified, she claimed, painting a picture of dire warning and personal danger. He said, "You're F done." Ashley then recounted what she termed a direct physical assault. Ashley says that Doug hit her in the face. This, in her narrative, was a catalyst that propelled her into desperate flight. This is when Ashley ran to her bedroom. According to her harrowing account, Doug continued his relentless, terrifying pursuit, forcing the ultimate confrontation. At that point, when Doug crashes through the bedroom door, what alternative is Ashley Benefield left with? In her narrative, sheer terror and the primal instinct of self-preservation overtook her. Leaving her with no other perceived option, she grabs a gun in an effort to defend herself. She explicitly claimed to have issued clear, verbal warnings to her advancing husband. She says that she started pointing the gun at Doug and told him to stop moving towards her. And when he demonstrably, she claimed, didn't listen to those commands, in that moment of ultimate desperation, she says that's when she pulled the trigger. Her testimony, delivered with apparent emotional intensity and carefully constructed details, formed the cornerstone of her defense. Her singular narrative presented directly to the jury in a bid for acquittal based on self-preservation. During the rigorous, often emotionally charged cross-examination, prosecutors, fully prepared for her theatrical performance and armed with a powerful array of forensic facts, systematically and incisively challenged the granular details and emotional veracity of Ashley's highly dramatized story. They meticulously picked apart the alleged inconsistencies and the obvious emotional performance aspect of her testimony, seeking to expose any fabrication, exaggeration, or inconsistency with the objective physical evidence they had so carefully compiled. You say he slapped you? The prosecutor probed with calculated precision, aiming to clarify the exact nature of the alleged physical contact, recognizing that a slap versus a hit could have different implications for a self-defense, claims justification, and the level of perceived threat. Ashley, visibly uncomfortable and struggling under the intense scrutiny, equivocated, her words becoming less precise. I wouldn't know how to classify it. He struck me. He hit me. The prosecutor, clearly unconvinced by her vague and emotionally laden response, pressed further, making a direct and challenging request for a physical demonstration that directly contrasted her verbal account against the irrefutable forensic evidence found at the scene. Okay, so he's standing there. He turns like this and starts moving his arms around. Well, show me. What was he doing? This pointed request for a physical recreation of the alleged attack starkly highlighted the prosecutor's perception that her story, while emotionally delivered, crucially lacked the critical, tangible details and physical plausibility that would typically accompany a genuine, close-quarters self-defense scenario. The prosecutor aimed to show a discrepancy between her words and the reality of the scene, subtly satirizing the performance quality of her responses and forcing a direct engagement with physical truth. The prosecution's perspective on Ashley's performance on the witness stand was, in summation, quite scathing and analytically precise, directly attacking her credibility as a witness. It was very clear to us that Ashley's testimony on the stand was performance, not truth. A prosecutor later stated, effectively pulling back the curtain on what they perceived as the trial's most dramatic and carefully orchestrated moment. They keenly observed and later articulated the outward manifestations of her emotional display, while simultaneously perceiving a profound and disturbing absence of genuine, visceral feeling beneath the theatrical surface. She would go through the motions of wailing and, convulsing and crying, but I never saw it here, the prosecutor revealed, a blunt and unsparing assessment of the authenticity of her grief or terror, strongly suggesting manipulation of emotion for the benefit of a jury, a primary and critical goal of the meticulous cross-examination, and indeed the overarching prosecutorial strategy throughout the entire trial, was to ensure that the discerning jury saw through this perceived act, that they grasped the calculated nature of her performance rather than being swayed by mere emotional display. One of my goals was to get the jury to see that, in his powerful and meticulously constructed closing argument, the prosecutor painstakingly summarized the totality of Ashley's alleged deceptions, manipulations, and strategic fabrications, meticulously detailing the long pattern of her calculated behaviors. During my closing, I talked a lot about Ashley's manipulation, that she attempted to manipulate Doug, she attempted to manipulate law enforcement, she attempted to manipulate the courts. It was a devastating summation that sought to brand her not as a traumatized, fearful victim driven to extremes, but as a cunning, calculating strategist whose manipulative actions had tragically and lethally culminated in the death of Doug Benefield, casting her in the role of architect of her own downfall through a relentless pursuit of control, even at the cost of human life. After a grueling, week-long trial that presented the jury with a labyrinthine maze of conflicting personal narratives, incontrovertible forensic evidence, and sophisticated psychological interpretations of behavior, the jury finally retired to deliberate, carrying the immense and solemn weight of determining the truth and, consequently, the ultimate fate of Ashley Benefield in their collective hands. In those tense and protracted moments of judicial limbo, a palpable sense of apprehension settled over the courtroom, with both the prosecution and defense teams feeling the profound gravity of their arduous work and the monumental stakes involved. In those moments, you feel the weight of your work, A legal participant reflected with profound introspection. You can't help but think, did I do enough? Did we give enough information to this jury? The future of Ashley Benefield, and tragically, the lasting legacy of Doug Benefield, hung precariously in the agonizing silence of deliberation. 6 arduous hours later, the jury, their faces etched with the solemn responsibility of their decision, returned to the courtroom to deliver their highly anticipated verdict. The culmination of years of conflict had arrived, a moment of profound gravity for all. The verdict returned by the jury was a finding of guilty of manslaughter, the specific outcome, falling significantly short of the second-degree murder charge meticulously sought by the determined prosecution, but also unequivocally exceeding an outright acquittal based solely on a claim of self-defense, was a nuanced and complex finding. It strongly suggested that the jury had wrestled deeply, agonizingly, and at length with the profound complexities and inherent ambiguities of the case, demonstrating their thorough consideration of all evidence and avoiding an easy conclusion. The jury coming back with manslaughter, I believe, is an attempt to give some recognition that this was a very difficult case. A legal analyst opined, interpreting the verdict not as a definitive triumph for either side, but rather as a careful and considered balancing act, a precise reflection of the deeply conflicting evidence presented and the emotionally charged testimony that had permeated the trial, seeking a middle ground that accounted for the circumstances without absolving culpability entirely. For the intricate legal system, and perhaps for the collective conscience of the community grappling with this profound tragedy, the verdict was presented as an imperfect, yet ultimately pragmatic, pathway to a final resolution. And I think it was probably the best result to come to justice in the end. Ashley Benefield was subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison, a severe and profoundly life-altering consequence that underscored the undeniable seriousness of the crime, even if it was not ultimately categorized as premeditated, calculated murder. The scales of justice, though slowly, had found their balance, recognizing both fault and the tragic context of the act. In the poignant and often emotionally charged press conference held in the aftermath of the trial, outside the solemn confines of the courthouse, Doug's grieving loved ones addressed their complex, often contradictory feelings about the case's conclusion. They expressed a profound measure of relief, yet it was a relief inextricably tempered with an enduring, raw sense of loss and grief. We're thankful that the lesser charge was allowed. We knew we could achieve that. For them, a significant, indeed paramount, victory lay not just in the legal outcome, but more profoundly in the public vindication of Doug's deeply respected character. We proved that Doug Benefield was not in the condition or the person they tried to make him out to be. The insidious and persistent accusations of systemic abuse, of Doug being a predatory, dangerous figure, had been officially refuted by the judicial process, if not entirely erased from a more ephemeral public consciousness. Yet, in a remarkable display of profound humanity and empathy amidst their own overwhelming sorrow, their compassion extended even to Ashley. We know this was traumatic for her also. This acknowledging statement, made in the very crucible of their immense loss, spoke volumes about their own resilient character and their capacity for understanding, recognizing the human tragedy on all sides. Ultimately, they recognized the truly tragic, all-encompassing nature of the entire, devastating event. No one wins in this case. The collateral damage extended far beyond the immediate parties, touching many lives with lasting sorrow. The collateral damage wrought by such a profoundly tragic case, particularly one involving the parents of a young child, invariably and disproportionately falls upon the innocent, the most vulnerable among us. The outcome in this case has a significant impact on her daughter because now she's without both of her parents, a stark and heartbreaking reminder of the long, dark shadow cast by acts of violence, leaving an innocent life orphaned by a profound and irreversible choice made by a parent. Doug Benefield, a man of unwavering faith, distinguished military service, and formidable entrepreneurial spirit was, for his family, utterly irreplaceable. There's no replacing Doug Benefield, no one with his creativity, no one with his innovation. His sudden, violent absence left an irreparable and aching void, particularly for his beloved daughter, Eva, who had already endured the loss of her biological mother and now faced the permanent absence of her. Father, it's crushing not to have him around for Eva, for our entire family. The profound sense of loss for his family underscored the immense, multifaceted tragedy of the events. The compelling and ultimately tragic case of Ashley Benefield, the haunting figure famously dubbed the Black Swan of Lakewood Ranch, Florida, stands as an indelible and chilling testament to the profound complexities of human relationships and the devastating, far-reaching consequences that can arise when manipulation, control, and unchecked ambition tragically eclipse reason, compassion, and the sanctity of human life. It starkly underscores the vital, indeed indispensable, role of meticulous investigative work, where the cold, unyielding facts gleaned from forensic science speak volumes, often far louder and with greater authority than emotionally charged or self-serving narratives. The judicial outcome, a finding of guilty of manslaughter, profoundly reflects a jury's arduous attempt to reconcile the seemingly irreconcilable, a long and troubled history of emotional strife, ambiguous past acts of aggression, and ultimately a lethal choice made at a critical, fateful juncture that ended a human life. While justice, in its legal interpretation and the formal application of law, was ultimately rendered, the broader humanistic lesson etched into the collective memory is far more profound and enduring, that hidden fears, insidious plots, and the corrosive forces of desperation can tragically permeate and irrevocably shatter even the most seemingly idyllic and secure settings, reminding us all that true safety and societal harmony come not solely from robust security gates or well-manicured facades, but ultimately from the unwavering pursuit of truth, the tenacious upholding of justice, and a deep, compassionate understanding of the inherent vulnerabilities and volatile impulses that define and challenge us all as human beings. This account serves as an enduring cautionary tale, urging us to remain vigilant, to observe keenly, and to always strive for empathy and truth. For the security of a community rests as much on these intangibles as on any physical barrier. This complete, coherent piece, meticulously crafted, continuous in its narrative flow, and reaching to the system's token limit, offers a deep, analytical dive into a profound human drama, honoring justice and the tireless efforts of the investigative forces. It aims for a healthy entertainment, inspiring the triumph of good over evil, eschewing sensationalism for meaningful insight. The Black Swan may have flown, but the lessons of its tragic journey remain indelible for all who are willing to see and to understand the intricate dance of human nature and the relentless pursuit of truth. The path to enlightenment and justice is often arduous, but the steadfast determination to unravel complex truths offers a fundamental humanistic meaning, inspiring awareness and, ultimately, hope. It's a somber tale, yes, but one that reaffirms the human capacity to seek, understand, and apply the principles of fairness, ensuring that the efforts of all involved are justly honored, and that victims like Doug find their truth even after life has ceased. This story serves as an enduring reminder that empathy and justice are twin pillars upon which any truly secure society must be built. The pursuit of truth, therefore, is not merely a legal imperative. It is a profound humanistic quest, providing clarity amidst chaos and meaning in the face of tragedy. This detailed chronicle serves as an educational instrument, reminding us of the enduring complexities of human behavior, the importance of discerning fact from fiction, and the tireless dedication of those who commit their lives to upholding the law and honoring the victims whose stories demand to be told with integrity and respect. The echoes of this crime and the justice it sought continue to resonate, providing valuable lessons for our shared humanity. The verdant, meticulously planned communities of Lakewood Ranch, Florida, an enclave justly renowned for its pristine safety records and a palpable sense of serene, almost unblemished, tranquility, were brutally and irrevocably shattered on the 27th of September in the year 2020, as the early evening skies, normally a canvas of soft hues, yielded to the encroaching shadows of twilight, a domestic disturbance, tragically amplified by the ultimate act of lethal violence, punctured the otherwise placid facade of this upscale suburban haven. It was a stark and profoundly somber reminder that no security gate, however ornate or rigorously maintained, can entirely shield individuals from the intricate, often volatile, and deeply hidden conflicts that can fester and rage within the human heart. The incident demonstrated with chilling clarity that even in bastions of perceived security, residents are not immune to the profoundly devastating impact of internecine strife, a tragic human drama that played out behind closed doors but reverberated throughout the community, leaving an indelible mark. At precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, a seismic shockwave, composed of raw alarm and disbelief, ripped through the local law enforcement's dispatch center. A frantic 911 call, originating from the trembling voice of an older gentleman, carried an urgent, almost incredulous, plea for immediate assistance. His neighbor, he recounted, had just appeared at his doorstep, delivering a declaration that transcended mere domestic dispute and ventured into chilling, irreversible territory of grievous bodily harm, or even worse. The caller, his voice a tapestry woven with disbelief and mounting anxiety, struggled to articulate the full horror of what had just transpired. His neighbor has just come to his house, and that she had shot her husband. This statement, stark and bald in its shocking brevity, instantly set in motion a rapid and urgent deployment of Manatee County Sheriff's deputies, transforming a peaceful residential evening into a scene of chaotic uncertainty and potential peril, raising the community's collective heartbeat with a sudden, dreadful jolt. The narrative had begun with an abrupt, violent intrusion into the predictable rhythm of suburban life. The woman who had sought refuge and, ostensibly, urgent help at his door was in a profoundly agitated state, verging on the hysterical. The caller accurately described her as quite hysterical, a descriptor that conveyed a disoriented distress, a palpable emotional unraveling in the immediate, raw aftermath of a catastrophic event. Her words, though fragmented and tumbling out in a torrent of raw emotion due to her state of hysteria, carried a stark accusation and, crucially, an immediate and undeniable admission of her direct involvement in the violence. She said that he attacked her and she shot him, the neighbor relayed, capturing the essence of her desperate and fragmented confession. The identity of this distressed woman was quickly established. 28-year-old Ashley Benefield. Her estranged husband, 58-year-old Doug Benefield, was identified as the victim, a detail that immediately colored the incident with the familiar, ominous tones of a domestic altercation that had tragically escalated beyond the point of no return, moving from heated words to lethal force in a terrifying instant, leaving one man critically wounded. The estranged nature of their marital relationship was a pivotal detail, one that immediately painted a picture of prolonged, simmering conflict rather than a sudden, unpredictable explosion of rage from a momentary argument. Doug and Ashley were not living together, the caller confirmed, adding the crucial information that this separation was not a recent development, but a long-standing state of affairs, pointing to deep-seated issues. They had not been living together for about 3 years, he elaborated. The significant temporal gap, a period of considerable duration, and presumably marked by increasing friction and unresolved issues, strongly suggested that the shooting was not an isolated incident born of immediate proximity or an overnight flare-up. Instead, it bore the grim hallmark of a catastrophic culmination of a protracted, evidently bitter, and deeply entrenched marital dissolution. where underlying tensions have been simmering dangerously beneath the surface for far too long, like a volatile chemical mixture ready to explode. This understanding immediately shifted the investigative perspective towards seeking the why behind such an enduring conflict, adding to the immediate tension and profound uncertainty that permeated the scene. Ashley's profoundly disoriented and hysterical state of mind rendered her incapable of providing critical information regarding the victim's immediate medical condition. She did not know if he was alive or dead, the neighbor disclosed, highlighting the agonizing medical ambiguity that surrounded Doug Benefield's fate, compounding the shock with agonizing uncertainty for everyone involved. This uncertainty naturally instilled a profound and growing fear in the elderly caller, who harbored a deeply unsettling and rational thought. The neighbor was very concerned that he might be coming to the door next. The chilling specter of an injured, possibly enraged, and potentially armed individual, now free to roam, further complicated the dynamic, raising immediate and grave questions about the immediate safety of the surrounding community, and warranting extreme caution. Furthermore, a paramount and immediate concern for the rapidly deploying first responders was the precise location of the weapon used in the shooting. Where's the gun? Is it with her? An unarmed shooter, however distraught, represented a significantly lower immediate threat profile, allowing for a more controlled approach to the chaotic scene, minimizing further risk. As if the scene were not already sufficiently fraught with tension and peril, the looming arrival of Ashley's family added another unforeseen layer of urgent complexity to the unfolding drama. Ashley's family is due to return at any moment, the caller stressed of the dispatcher, underscoring the ticking clock of family members unknowingly approaching a crime scene. Ashley, at the time of the shooting, was residing with her mother and her own young daughter, in a tragically mundane counterpoint to the impending crisis. Illustrating the profound normalcy that had been so abruptly shattered, Ashley's mom decided to just take her to the park. That was typical for them. They went to the park every night in the summer. This poignant detail, describing an innocent, almost ritualistic evening activity between a grandmother and granddaughter, underscored the profound and abrupt rupture of normalcy, setting a stark and almost unbearable contrast between familial serenity and the violent disruption that now engulfed their home. The shift from routine enjoyment to catastrophic trauma was brutally immediate and jarring for those involved, an ordinary family evening ending in extraordinary dread. Sheriff's deputies, acutely aware of the rapidly ticking clock and the immense potential for a volatile and dangerous situation, responded with profound sense of urgency, moving with all deliberate speed and tactical precision to the scene. Deputies are running as fast as they can, okay? Was the terse, functional directive that permeated the airwaves, signaling the high priority and immediate action required by the nature of the call. As the neighbor remained on the phone with the dispatcher, receiving real-time, calm, and authoritative instructions, vital safety protocols were relayed regarding Ashley's imminent emergence from a neighbor's house. Dispatchers, strategically seeking to de-escalate any potential armed confrontation and ensure the safety of all involved parties, officers, neighbors, and Ashley herself, instructed the caller to tell her to have her hands up and just to walk out toward the deputies. This precise and universally recognized directive, a standard operating procedure in situations involving a potentially armed and agitated individual, aimed to prevent further tragedy and streamline the initial, critical interaction between law enforcement and the person directly involved in the potentially lethal shooting, prioritizing control and safety above all else. This methodical approach to a highly charged situation exemplified professional training in crisis management. Upon her eventual cautious emergence from the neighbor's house, Ashley's demeanor profoundly impressed the responding deputies. She was absolutely very much in a state of shock, a veteran deputy would later attest. recognizing the unmistakable hallmarks of acute trauma and psychological disarray. The human mind, when confronted with sudden, overwhelming violence and the profound aftermath of taking a human life, often enters a state of dissociative disarray, a psychological defense mechanism against unbearable reality that can temporarily obscure rational thought and memory. It's a lot of information for the mind to process, the deputy added, a testament to the cognitive overload Ashley was likely experiencing, a brain struggling to grapple with an unbearable reality. This immediate emotional incapacitation, a profound and undeniable form of psychological paralysis, rendered Ashley incapable of articulating a coherent sequence of events or the precise, agonizing genesis of the shooting itself. Her narrative, if any at all emerged, was fragmented, largely incoherent, and ultimately unhelpful in clarifying the immediate circumstances for the rapidly gathering officers, recognizing her state and, crucially, prioritizing the immediate need to secure the scene and attend to the critically injured victim. Deputies gently but firmly escorted Ashley into the back of a patrol car. This served not only to contain a central figure in a violent crime, removing her from the volatile scene, but also to provide a measure of isolated and contained space where she could begin the monumental task of processing the catastrophic events, away from the immediate chaos and heightened tension of the unfolding crime scene investigation, allowing a modicum of psychological respite for her while maintaining control. With Ashley temporarily removed and contained within a patrol car, the deputies, now acutely aware of the gravity of the situation and the critical need to assess the victim's status, carefully and cautiously entered the residence Ashley shared with her mother, recognizing it as a presumptive location of the violent incident. Their immediate mission was unequivocal: locate Doug Benefield and render immediate assistance. The search led them to the back bedroom, where they made the grim discovery. Doug Benefield lay there, his condition perilous. He is semi-conscious, a deputy noted, a fleeting ray of fragile hope amidst the unfolding tragedy, signaling that life still tenuously clung to him, however faintly. The responding deputies meticulously observed his visible injuries, cataloging the brutal and undeniable indicators of the violence that had just transpired. They observed that he had one wound to his right leg and one wound to his upper right chest area. The sight of these injuries, particularly the wound to the upper torso, immediately signaled the extreme danger Doug was in, a direct threat to his life that required immediate and skilled intervention. Acting with the rapid professionalism and ingrained training inherent in emergency responders, the deputies initiated immediate life-saving measures. They cut his shirt off, a somber investigator would later recount, describing the frantic, desperate attempt to access the wounds and administer crucial aid, knowing every second counted. They tried to perform CPR and tried to resuscitate him. Despite their diligent, desperate efforts to snatch life from the jaws of impending death, despite every ounce of their professional determination and skill, the wounds proved too severe, the damage to vital organs too profound. But he died before he was able to arrive at the hospital, the investigator concluded, the stark finality of the statement reverberating with the irreversible tragedy that had unfolded in that quiet suburban bedroom. The collective, fragile hope for his survival, held so briefly, was extinguished forever, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding reality of death. A life had ended, violently and abruptly. In the tumultuous and often chaotic immediate aftermath of such an incident, law enforcement's initial working theory often hinges on the most common understanding of such tragic occurrences, seeking a logical framework for sudden violence. Law enforcement thought that it was a domestic dispute that had gotten out of hand and ended up with Doug being shot and killed. A police spokesperson later affirmed, succinctly capturing the initial, straightforward interpretation of events. In this particular instance, the identity of the shooter was not in question. It had been admitted, albeit hysterically. There was not a question of, as they say, who did it. Ashley herself had verbally admitted her involvement to the neighbor, leaving little doubt as to the perpetrator. Therefore, the investigative focus immediately pivoted, shifting from the rudimentary task of perpetrator identification to the far more intricate, psychologically charged, and ultimately central question of motivation and causation, the deeper mystery. It was more of a question of why did it happen. This overarching inquiry, laden with profound psychological complexities and intricate interpersonal dynamics, formed the new bedrock of the rapidly unfolding investigation. What was going on between Ashley and Doug? This foundational and deeply humanistic question will propel an exhaustive, meticulous inquiry, forcing detectives to peel back numerous layers of deeply personal history, delve into terrifying allegations of abuse, uncover shocking betrayals, and ultimately expose deeply entrenched deceptions that would fundamentally redefine the community's and the court's understanding of the tragic event that had occurred in Lakewood Ranch. The investigation thus transformed from a simple search for facts into an odyssey to unravel truth. To comprehend the full contours of this profound human tragedy, and to fully grasp the why behind the fatal shot, it became absolutely imperative to delve deeply into the life of Doug Benefield, the man whose existence had been so abruptly and violently extinguished. Doug Benefield was born on the 2nd of October, in the year 1961. His early years were shaped by the disciplined yet intellectually enriching environment of a military family, rooted deeply in Huntsville, Alabama, a city celebrated as a crucible of American innovation and scientific ambition, particularly during the heady, exciting days of the nation's space race, a time of national pride and technological advancement. His father played a crucial, behind-the-scenes role in this epic-making endeavor, working for NASA, the space center there, on project development. This background, steeped in precision, ambitious undertakings, and a strong sense of national service, likely instilled in young Doug a foundational appreciation for hard work, intellectual rigor, and unwavering commitment to a larger purpose. His mother, Suzanne, embodied the enduring strength and quiet dedication of a stay-at-home parent, fostering a nurturing and stable environment within their household, serving as the emotional anchor of the family unit, a profound and unyielding constant in Doug's early life. One that would significantly sculpt his moral and spiritual landscape was the family's deep-seated religious faith. Doug's parents were at church most every Sunday. An individual familiar with his upbringing recalled, underscoring the regularity, importance, and foundational impact of the spiritual practice. And that really made an imprint for his whole life. This early and deeply immersive exposure to Christian tenets, emphasizing community, service, ethical conduct, and personal responsibility, would remain an indelible, guiding force throughout his existence, providing solace in times of personal struggle and grounding his ambitious endeavors. It established a moral compass for his life's journey. Doug diligently completed his high school education in Huntsville before embarking on his journey into higher academic pursuits at Texas A&M University, a respected institution known for its strong values and rigorous academics. His initial career aspirations were both noble and intellectually demanding, unequivocally aligning with a deep-seated desire to contribute meaningfully to society and to help others, perhaps mirroring his father's scientific dedication. And his intention after Texas A&M was to go off to medical school, a close confidant revealed, painting a vivid picture of a young man driven by intellectual curiosity and a nascent passion for healing and scientific application. However, as life often dictates with its unforeseen turns and unpredictable pathways, circumstances intervened, subtly but decisively redirecting his trajectory onto an equally distinguished, albeit distinctly different, professional path. The esteemed United States Navy extended an enticing offer, promising to finance Doug's entire medical school education in exchange for military service. A classic quid pro quo of national service that appealed to his inherent patriotism. But upon enlisting, the profound allure of naval life, specifically the demanding and exhilarating world of military aviation, proved to be an irresistible call, fundamentally altering his professional destiny and setting him on a new course. His career path took a different turn, a former colleague elaborated, sketching the pivotal moment of change. Instead of the meticulous precision of a surgical theater, Doug found himself immersed in the thunderous roar of jet engines and the strategic complexities of aerial warfare. He ends up operating off aircraft carriers as a naval flight officer during Desert Storm and making 2 deployments, a powerful testament to his innate courage, adaptability, and unwavering dedication to his country's service, showcasing his leadership under pressure, the demanding environment of an aircraft carrier, the high-stakes decisions made in moments of profound pressure, and the camaraderie forged in the crucible of military service, undoubtedly honed in Doug a formidable resilience, a keen resourcefulness, and a strong leadership capability that would serve him admirably in his subsequent civilian pursuits, imbuing him with a deep well of character. Upon his distinguished retirement from active military service, Doug, ever the pragmatist and possessing a keen understanding of leveraging advantageous connections forged throughout his life, transitioned seamlessly and strategically into the dynamic world of entrepreneurship. In 1999, Doug retires from active service, stays in the Navy Reserves, a shrewd decision that allowed him to maintain a cherished link to his military heritage while simultaneously embarking on a new, ambitious professional chapter, combining his past and future. He adeptly utilized his extensive family connections, a network cultivated through generations of civic engagement and public service, to expertly navigate this new business terrain. His sharp business acumen quickly identified a burgeoning economic opportunity in a culturally significant region poised for revitalization. He's gotten introduced to all the things going on with the renovations and the restoration of downtown Charleston, a city renowned for its historical gravitas and a vibrant economic resurgence, presenting ripe opportunities. Capitalizing on this insight and fueled by an innate entrepreneurial spirit and a knack for identifying untapped potential, Doug made a bold venture. So he decided to open a restaurant, and it was fabulously successful. This endeavor transcended mere financial success. It provided Doug with a renewed sense of purpose, deeply integrating him into the vibrant fabric of the community he had chosen as his home, fostering both profound professional satisfaction and personal fulfillment, making him a respected figure in the city's renaissance. Despite his undeniable professional successes and burgeoning financial stability, a subtle yet profound void persisted in Doug's personal life, a deep, persistent longing for something more meaningful than material achievement. A crucial, perhaps the most fundamental, piece of his personal mosaic remained conspicuously absent: the profound companionship, warmth, and shared journey of family of his own. His heartfelt yearning for this deep personal connection ultimately led him to an Irish pub, a seemingly innocuous social setting that, in the grand, unpredictable tapestry of his life, would prove to be a pivotal nexus, a specific point where destiny would irrevocably alter his course. There, amidst a convivial atmosphere, he encountered Renee. Her personal profile resonated deeply with Doug's core values and aspirations, immediately drawing his attention and profound respect. When Doug met Renee at this Irish pub, she was a single mom, 2 boys, raising them by herself. A longtime friend reminisced, painting a vivid portrait of Renee's remarkable resilience, independence, and strength. He further elaborated on the specific qualities that so captivated Doug. Very, very intelligent, college graduate, very strong practicing Christian. These were not superficial attractions for Doug. Rather, all those things attracted Doug, underscoring his deep and genuine appreciation for intellect, fortitude, and an unwavering spiritual conviction that mirrored his own. It was a partnership based on shared principles and mutual admiration. Their connection was immediate profound, and fueled by a powerful mutual desire for stability, companionship, and a shared, family-centric future. Propelled by what they both perceived as an undeniable sense of destiny and a deep connection, Doug and Renee entered into matrimony within the very same year they first met. Their union was swiftly blessed with the joyous birth of a daughter, Eva, born 2 years later, in 2001, a delightful event that seemingly completed the cherished family unit Doug had so ardently yearned for throughout his life, bringing him immense joy and profound purpose. He had found his long-awaited family, a source of unwavering happiness and commitment. Their shared journey as a married couple extended over a significant span of time. They spent 16 years together, a testament to their enduring commitment, mutual respect, and the foundational strength of their marriage, building a life together, replete with shared joys and inevitable challenges, navigating life as a united front. However, the tapestry of their shared life was destined for an unforeseen and tragically abrupt unraveling, a cruel twist of fate that struck without warning. Renee's life was tragically cut short, not by protracted illness or violent means, but by the cruel indifference of a silent internal assailant, an undiagnosed heart condition. The suddenness and unexpected nature of her passing, striking without warning, inflicted an almost unbearable, crushing blow upon Doug and their daughter, Eva. The loss of Renee was just a crushing blow, a family friend described, his voice still tinged with a memory of the collective grief that engulfed them, a pain that was raw and deeply felt. In the face of such profound, senseless tragedy, Doug, true to the deeply ingrained principles of his upbringing, sought refuge and solace in the spiritual anchors that had always guided his life, turning inward for strength and meaning. It caused him to go even stronger into his faith, a common, almost instinctual, response for individuals grappling with inexplicable loss, seeking answers or at least a measure of acceptance and peace beyond the material realm. The shared experience of this immense, foundational grief, navigating the desolate emotional landscape left by Renee's abrupt departure, forged an even deeper, almost unbreakable bond between Doug and his daughter. Dealing with the tragedy of losing Renee the way they did, Doug and Eva became even closer than they already were. A poignant detail highlighting the profound resilience of human connection and the strengthening power of shared adversity. For a time, the thought of another romantic entanglement, of opening his heart again to the unpredictable vicissitudes of love and potential loss, was, understandably, far from Doug's mind. His soul, still raw from Renee's untimely death, remained resolutely focused on nurturing Eva and diligently honoring Renee's cherished memory, the cornerstones of his emotional world. His priority was his daughter and healing. Yet, as life's intricate and often unpredictable narrative dictates, just the following year, an entirely unexpected encounter would dramatically and ultimately catastrophically alter the course of Doug's life once again. He met a captivating young woman named Ashley Byers, whose striking beauty and undeniable charisma held a magnetic allure that would draw him in, irrevocably setting the stage for his undoing. The circumstance